Hey guys, some people walk through history like they accidentally wandered out of an action movie without ever realizing they were in one. You can try to be smart, careful, and responsible. And then there are the people who prove that sometimes all it takes is one dumb decision plus a miracle that defies physics to earn a spot in the history books. These aren't survival geniuses. These are the folks who would fail an IQ test so badly you'd check the batteries in the machine, and yet somehow they still win at life. So let's kick things off with the man who perfectly represents the phrase dumb luck. 1. Timothy Dexter, investing in ways no human should ever copy. Timothy Dexter is living proof that the universe occasionally turns on assist mode for players who are clearly lost on the map. The man didn't just lack business knowledge, he lacked the basic instincts required to notice when people were setting him up. The wealthy elites of his time thought he was hilariously clueless, so they fed him investment ideas designed to fail. Like selling heating pans in the West Indies, a place so hot people don't even want to wear clothes, let alone warm themselves. Dexter heard the idea and went, sure, why not? And of course, because physics and logic took the day off, the locals ended up buying every pan to scoop molasses. He sold out instantly, but Timothy wasn't done with speed-running confusion. Next, he shipped coal to Newcastle. Yes, Newcastle, the coal capital of the coal world. The business equivalent of carrying a bottle of water into the desert and telling the sun you can compete. Except when he arrived, the miners were on strike. Supply dropped, prices shot up. Timothy Dexter made a fortune. Right place, right time, absolutely zero logic. If cluelessness had a market value, Timothy Dexter would have been listed on the stock exchange. 2. Elmer the Flying Monk. The monk who thought he was a bird and jumped off a monastery. Elmer was the kind of guy who saw birds flying and thought, I can do that. I just need 2 wings and a little faith. The only problem was everything else in the plan. He built himself a pair of wooden wings, strapped them on in full medieval DIY spirit, and climbed the monastery tower like an athlete about to debut a brand new sport. Elmer jumped. And surprise, the idea wasn't completely terrible. He actually glided for nearly 200 meters, long enough for people watching to think he was about to open a flight school. Then the wind shifted, and Elmer, lacking any sort of steering mechanism, did not. He dropped straight down and broke both legs, ending his aviation career in under a minute. The lucky part wasn't the flight, it was the fall. By the physics standards of that era, Elmer should have become a warning poster on every church tower. Instead, he lived, and even claimed the only mistake he made was forgetting to add a tail for stability. Elmer didn't fly well, but he flew just long enough to become a legend of dumb ideas that somehow worked halfway. 3. The farmer who tried a homemade parachute and somehow lived. An English farmer once believed his talent for weaving cloth could replace actual aerodynamics. He tied a bedsheet to his body, stepped onto his roof, and radiated the confidence of a man who thought he had just invented a new sport. If Franz Reichelt had a poorly calculated idea, this farmer was the countryside edition, but far more optimistic. He jumped. The sheet flapped like a banana leaf in the wind. It created no drag at all and only spun him around like a malfunctioning windmill. Witnesses described the fall as a demo version of a video game where the developer forgot to code the landing. Shockingly, the fall did not end with a crowd screaming. It ended with a badly placed bush. The bush absorbed the entire impact, and the farmer popped up with the energy of someone who had just discovered all his teeth were still intact. The only reasonable conclusion is that Darwin looked down, saw the attempt, and took the afternoon off. If you ever need proof that luck can patch terrible design flaws, this is your living example. 4. Claudius, the fool who accidentally became the Roman emperor. Claudius proved that being underestimated can sometimes be the greatest survival strategy, even if you have no idea you are using it. His royal family treated him like that awkward relative no one wants to invite to dinner because he might say something unfiltered. When palace purges erupted, all the smart people were wiped out, and Claudius was still there, too busy trembling with anxiety to be considered a threat. When Caligula was assassinated, the guards ran everywhere looking for someone to crown. They lifted a curtain expecting to catch a political mastermind. Instead, they found Claudius hiding like a student hoping the teacher wouldn't call on him. The miracle is that instead of ignoring him, they decided he was the new emperor. Probably because a man who was scared did not look capable of plotting anything complicated. Claudius rose to the throne not because of talent, but because no one believed he could cause trouble. It was the kind of luck you only get when life puts you in the right place at the exact moment everyone else runs out of options. He is one of the rare cases where constant failure somehow ends in spectacular success. 5. Vince el Fusilado. The man who stood still for 10 gunshots and walked away like nothing had happened. Vince was the kind of guy who, when someone yelled "run," somehow heard that standing still was the safest option. Facing a firing squad, he did not bargain, did not run, did not fake a collapse. He just stood there like he was waiting for the photographer to adjust the lighting. 6 soldiers raised their rifles and did their job. The surprising part is that Vince's body processed bullets in the most minimalist way possible. One grazed him, one hit a non-essential spot. The final shot, the one meant to end everything, passed through his cheek as if it were trying not to inconvenience him. When the soldiers left, Vince lay on the ground with the calm of a man testing a new meditation technique. He waited for silence, then crawled off to find life again. If a video game had a protect the main character mode, Vince had it turned on without even knowing. It is hard to believe that a total lack of survival instinct became his strongest weapon. Other people make plans. Vince had stubbornness and a level of luck any action movie hero would beg for. 6. Frane Selak. The man who kept almost dying, but the universe refused to let him. Frane Selak is the living definition of unlucky enough to crash, lucky enough to walk away. His first accident happened when he chose a flight so cheap that any reasonable person would have questioned it. The plane exploded. Frane was sucked out of the cabin and dropped toward the earth like a biology experiment. The bizarre part is that he landed in a pile of hay and woke up as if he had just taken a nap. After that, he turned every mode of transportation into a survival challenge. A train derailed. He lived. A bus plunged into a river. He lived. His car caught fire. He opened the door and stepped out like an actor tired of the scene. Another car went off a cliff. He was thrown out at the perfect moment to avoid the explosion. If someone wrote this as a script, it would get rejected for being too unrealistic. In every disaster, Frane escaped in a way that made people wonder if he was carrying a lucky charm he did not even know existed. His luck did not just defy statistics. It defied the audience's patience for what the universe would allow. And just to prove the universe was fully committed to the bit, the first time he bought a lottery ticket in 40 years, he hit the jackpot. 7. Peter Freuchen, solving every problem with frozen poop. Peter Freuchen was the kind of man who, when trapped in a disaster, did not panic. He simply thought, I can make a tool out of whatever is left. In this case, whatever was left happened to be poop. He was stuck under a thick layer of Arctic ice with no tools and no help. Any normal person would have accepted this as the final scene of their movie. Peter saw it as a creative challenge. He packed the poop into the shape of a blade, placed it on the frozen ground, and waited for it to harden. When it reached the right level of, well, knife-like solidity, he used it as an actual cutting tool. The idea broke every rule of safety, hygiene, and science. But it worked. Peter chipped away the ice, holding him down with something no survival handbook would ever list under alternative equipment. Once free, he continued proving his absurd durability by cutting off his frostbitten toes with a pair of pliers. No anesthesia, no operating room, just pure determination and a level of luck that is difficult to explain. Peter did not just survive. He became the patron saint of reckless decisions that somehow succeed in ways no one on Earth wants to replicate. 8. Mad Jack Churchill. Marching into battle like he was performing at a festival, some soldiers brought discipline to the battlefield. Mad Jack Churchill brought the entire prop department of a parade. While his comrades loaded rifles, he checked his longbow, polished his sword, and made sure his bagpipes were ready for whatever dramatic moment might come. None of this was for comedy. This was his actual military strategy. Mad Jack took down enemies with a longbow in the Second World War, a modern-era achievement no one has tried to repeat. When he was not using the bow, he drew his sword and charged ahead like a time-traveling warrior who missed the memo about modern warfare. And when he wanted psychological impact, he played his bagpipes right in the middle of the fighting, producing a sound that made both sides pause to figure out what on earth was happening. The astonishing part is that this strategy had a higher survival rate than many sensible plans. Bullets flew around him as if they did not want to interrupt the performance. Mad Jack lived through the entire Second World War without losing his theatrical flair. He proved that sometimes luck favors the man who is too committed to his style to fear anything at all. 9. King Wenceslaus. The man who survived because he overslept. History has kings who survived through armies, kings who survived through diplomacy, and then there is King Wenceslaus, who survived because of his bed. One morning, he was scheduled to go to church as usual. Assassins were already in position outside, fully armed, highly motivated, and just waiting for the main character to step out. But there was one small issue. Wenceslaus woke up late. Not because of a conspiracy, not because of intuition, simply because he did not feel like leaving his warm bed on a cold morning. The assassins waited at the door with the exact energy of people who accidentally set their alarms for the wrong time. They waited, then waited more, then started questioning whether they had the correct day. Eventually, they decided the plan must have been exposed and retreated before getting caught. Meanwhile, Wenceslaus got up, put on his coat, and went about his day with the calm of a man completely unaware he had just defeated an assassination plot using the laziest strategy possible. This story not only highlights his luck, it is one of the rare cases where oversleeping accidentally becomes the most effective security method of all time. 10. James Bartley. Swallowed by a whale and somehow lived. Some people fall into the water and worry about getting their clothes wet. James Bartley fell into the water and worried about becoming the lunch special for a sperm whale. While his crew was fighting the massive creature, James slipped off the boat and landed directly in its mouth. If we are ranking the worst places to fall, this one is easily top tier. James disappeared in the chaos of the ocean. When the whale was finally killed and hauled onto the deck, the crew began cutting it open to process the meat. Deep inside the thick layers, they noticed something faintly moving. It was James, lying inside the whale's stomach, breathing weakly like a man who had just completed a detox session he never signed up for. He had been in there for nearly 15 hours. His skin was bleached, his hair had lost its color, and his eyes looked like someone who had just gotten their operating system rebooted. The wild part is that he walked away from this without losing a single body part. Just a few pigments. James Bartley became the real-life Jonah, but with the energy of someone who absolutely never expected to end up in a textbook for this reason. 11. The flying sailor, blown a kilometer through the air and lived. This sailor was simply watching the Halifax harbor, a job with very low risk unless two ships decide to collide and create an explosion powerful enough to turn you into unidentified flying cargo. He stood at a distance too close to make sense and too far to be safe. The result was his entire body being launched skyward at a speed not covered in any naval training manual. Witnesses said he flew almost a full kilometer, tracing a trajectory that, if captured on camera, would be used in physics classes as an example of pure exceptions. While every piece of clothing he had was blasted off him, his survival instinct clung on like glue. He landed not with groans, but with the confused expression of a man trying to remember how he ended up airborne in the first place. The fact that he got up with only a few bruises has confused experts ever since. Some say he landed in exactly the right spot. Others insist the blast temporarily put him in a damage-free state. If anyone has ever accidentally broken every law of physics in one afternoon and then walked home afterward, it is the flying sailor. 12. King Zog. The Albanian king who shot back at his assassin in the street. Most heads of state are trained to duck or find cover when they hear gunfire. King Zog operated on a completely different rulebook. When an assassin attacked him right in front of the Vienna Opera House, his entire entourage sprinted for safety. Zog responded the way a very unhappy customer might. He pulled out his own gun and fired back right there on the sidewalk. The shootout happened so fast, it looked like an action scene nobody had time to choreograph. Zog moved and shot at the same time, while the assassin clearly did not expect the king to be armed, let alone skilled. In the end, Zog walked away untouched, and the assassination attempt collapsed simply because no one had anticipated this level of royal counterattack. And that was just one entry in a collection of 55 assassination attempts against him. Most people would treat that number as a reminder to live more cautiously. Zog treated them like recurring appointments he was obligated to attend. His ability to stay upright in chaos and immediately return fire turned him into a historical phenomenon. He was a king who survived not through luck alone, but through a level of boldness so extreme that luck had no choice but to keep up with him. 13. Fidel Castro. 600 assassination attempts, and not a single one worked. In the long history of assassination plots, few people can boast a failure collection as impressive as Fidel Castro's. The CIA spent decades trying to take him out, producing a list of plans so creative they bordered on comedic. Poison was sent to him, but dissolved inside a jar of face cream. An explosive seashell was planted at one of his diving spots, as if he would casually pick up the one object that looked like a prop from a theater play. They built a pen with a poisoned needle, but the handler forgot how to trigger it. They even recruited an ex-lover to deliver the fatal dose, but the pill broke down before ever reaching the target. Every plot looked solid on paper but fell apart in execution, making people wonder whether the team was accidentally beta testing the limits of human incompetence. After roughly 600 attempts, Castro kept appearing in public with the calm of a man completely unaware he had just sidestepped several new death scenarios. He survived not only because of luck, but because every plan against him behaved like an untested prototype. 14. Adolfo Suarez, saved by a bird. Some politicians survive thanks to heavy security. Adolfo Suarez survived thanks to a creature that weighed less than half a kilo. During a hunting trip with a friend, Suarez stood nearby with no idea he was about to become the answer to the question, what could go wrong when two people with guns stand too close? The answer arrived instantly when his friend accidentally swung the gun toward Suarez's head and pulled the trigger. The story should have ended there. But at that exact moment, a random bird in the forest decided to change its flight path. It flew directly into the bullet's trajectory, taking the hit in a kind of unsolicited intervention no one could have predicted. Suarez stood frozen. His friend turned pale. And the bird completed the shortest yet most effective bodyguard assignment in political history. Suarez survived without a scratch, largely because the bird's flight path aligned with the worst possible moment. Some call it luck. Some call it a bizarre accident. Suarez likely understood one thing clearly. Sometimes a bodyguard comes from nature. If there were an award for unexpected heroic acts, that bird would take first place without competition. 15. Emperor Bokassa, saved by a stainless steel serving tray. Some emperors survive thanks to elaborate armor. Bokassa survived thanks to kitchenware. During a formal reception, he was chatting with guests when an assassin hurled a grenade straight at him. The normal reaction would be to run or duck. Bokassa stood just long enough to witness one of the strangest life-saving moments in history. The waiter nearby had no shield and no weapon. All he had was a stainless steel serving tray. In a split second, when most brains would process only panic, he instinctively raised the tray. The grenade hit the metal surface, changed direction, and flew off before exploding. The serving tray became the most effective defensive tool in the room, and quite possibly the only piece of kitchen equipment to ever save an emperor. Bokassa was unharmed. The waiter instantly became a legend in the service industry, though no one on Earth wants to recreate the act of blocking a grenade with a dining tray. This story proves that sometimes fate does not require a hero. It just needs the right person, the right moment, and the right tray. 16. Roy Sullivan went outside to enjoy the day, and the sky replied with 7 lightning strikes. Roy Sullivan is the only man who made lightning look like it had a personal hobby. He did not chase storms. He did not challenge nature. He simply lived a normal life as a park ranger. Yet every time the sky turned stormy, lightning seemed to spot him in the crowd and send a direct message straight to his coordinates. The first strike felt like a rare accident. The second made him look at the sky with suspicion. By the third, Roy understood he had become the main character in a story no one wants to star in. From that point on, every workday felt like the upgraded difficulty mode of a survival game. The remarkable part is not that lightning targeted him. It is that Roy survived all 7 strikes. Each time, he brushed off his hat, patted out the fire in his hair, and went back to work like someone dealing with a minor office inconvenience. Eventually, he even carried a can of water specifically to put out future hair fires, a habit only a veteran of high-voltage encounters would develop. Roy did not avoid lightning, and lightning did not avoid him. But in every showdown, he walked away, a fact even the laws of physics struggle to justify. 17. King Hassan. 2. Overturned a coup with one single line. Some leaders survive coups through military counterattacks. King Hassan too survived with improvisation skills. During a flight in 1972, the Boeing carrying him was suddenly attacked by his own Air Force. Bullets ripped through the fuselage. The engines failed. Smoke filled the cabin. The entire situation looked like a stress exam no one ever wanted to take. In the chaos, Hassan too did not run or hide. He grabbed the crew's radio and shouted into it with full authority. "The king is dead. You have succeeded." One sentence that hit the psychology of the attackers harder than any defense tactic. The coup pilots believed it instantly. They stopped firing, switched formation, and even escorted the bullet-riddled plane to a safe landing. Only after touching down did they realize they had just protected the very man they were trying to eliminate. It was the kind of moment that forces an entire coup squad to rethink its verification process. Hassan, too, did not win with guns or a complicated strategy. He won with calm, timing, and improvisation faster than the enemy's rate of fire. A rare plot twist in political history, and easily one of the most memorable. 18. John Starks. The longest handshake that accidentally saved a life. John Starks is one of the rare cases where excessive politeness literally changed someone's fate. He had been sentenced to death for desertion and was marched to the execution ground, standing in front of a firing squad, waiting for the order. At this point, he should have had only seconds left, but then a friend approached to say goodbye, and Starks instinctively extended his hand, the way someone does when they don't want their last impression to be rude. Instead of a quick shake, the two of them just stood there, holding hands for an awkwardly long time. Long enough that the firing squad grew confused. Delays rarely happen at executions, so the moment looked less like a death sentence and more like an intermission. They kept holding hands, as if both were trying to extend a conversation no one planned for. That accidental pause bought just enough time. A rider appeared in the distance, galloping toward them with a raised document. It was a pardon from higher command. If Starks had let go even a few seconds earlier, the rifles would have fired before the letter entered anyone's line of sight. Starks survived thanks to a gesture of politeness that should have been meaningless. A simple handshake turned into an unplanned survival strategy, and somehow it worked. 19. Maggie Dickson. Hanged, declared dead, and then woke up like she had just taken a nap. Maggie Dickson is the woman who made the entire Scottish legal system freeze in confusion. Sentenced to death in 1724, she was taken to the gallows, hanged before a crowd, and left up long enough for everyone to believe the execution was complete. Her body was taken down, placed in a coffin, the lid nailed shut, and the procession to the cemetery began. In every official sense, the sentence had been fully carried out. On the way to the burial ground, the carriers heard knocking from inside the coffin. At first, they blamed the bumpy road, but the knocking came again, louder and more deliberate. When they pried open the lid, they found Maggie wide awake, gasping like someone who had just been forced out of a very unwanted nap. The crowd panicked. Maggie was simply confused, unsure how she had just dodged death by technicality. Under the law of the time, a person who had been hanged until dead could not be executed a second time if the sentence had already been carried out. Maggie was released. No retry, no appeal. She walked back into town as a system glitch that no one was legally allowed to fix. From then on, she became known as Half-Hanged Maggie, a title both strange and perfectly fitting. She lived for many decades, proving that sometimes a technical error can be the best gift a human ever receives. 20. Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived 2 atomic bombs because he picked the wrong day to go home. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is the only man who can say I experienced atomic bombs in the plural. He was on a work trip in Hiroshima on the exact day Little Boy was dropped. The blast tore the city apart, shattered windows, burned his skin, and left him temporarily deaf. But Yamaguchi still managed to stand up, like someone who had just lived through a catastrophic event but decided he still needed to show up for work the next day. He immediately returned home to Nagasaki to recover. If the story ended there, it would not be remarkable. But the next morning, while he was explaining to his boss about a very large flash of light he saw in Hiroshima, Fat Man detonated over Nagasaki. Employees dropped to the floor. Yamaguchi probably just sighed because the feeling was starting to get familiar. He survived both explosions with severe injuries, yet still recovered. Even doctors struggled to explain how one man could be at ground zero of 2 world-changing catastrophes and still live to 93. If luck had levels, Yamaguchi held the version that deserves its own footnote in the history books. 21. Anders Hellstrup almost got headshot by a meteor while skydiving. Some days you go skydiving and the wind is a bit stronger than expected. Anders Hellstrup had a different kind of day. He jumped out of the plane, deployed his parachute properly, and expected a calm, predictable descent. But the sky had a side quest prepared for him. It placed him in one of the rarest crossover events ever recorded between a human and a meteor. While drifting through the air, a dark object shot past Anders' head at a speed so fast the camera on his helmet barely captured it. He did not notice a thing in the moment. Only when he reviewed the footage at home did he realize he had narrowly avoided a collision that could have turned this jump into a geology lecture. A meteor falling to Earth is already rare. A meteor passing inches from the head of a skydiver is even rarer. A meteor being recorded on camera at such close range that you can clearly see its shape is so unlikely it practically deserves its own category in scientific statistics. Anders landed safely, packed up his parachute, and became the first person with actual video proof of almost being smacked by outer space. No insurance company covers this scenario because no one ever thought it could happen. Anders' luck operates on a planetary scale. 22. Hugh Williams. The man whose name refused to let ships kill him. Maritime history is full of strange stories, but few sequences have made people double-check population records the way the case of Hugh Williams did. In 1664, a ship sank off the coast of Wales. The entire crew was lost. Only one person survived. His name was Hugh Williams. People called it extraordinary luck. 21 years later, another ship went down in the same spot. Once again, only one person lived. And yes, his name was also Hugh Williams. At this point, sailors started looking at the ocean like it was running some bizarre employee selection program. But the story was not done. In 1820, yet another ship wrecked in the same waters, and once again, a single survivor was pulled from the sea. His name, unbelievably, was Hugh Williams. 3 shipwrecks, 3 sole survivors. One name. If the ocean had its own algorithm, it apparently tried to be consistent while also being weirdly lazy. No one has ever explained this with normal logic. Maybe it is an extreme coincidence. Maybe statistics decided to rebel. Or maybe the name Hugh Williams comes with built-in shipwreck protection mode. Whatever the reason, this is the kind of luck that makes even the ocean raise an eyebrow. 23. Charles Mayhew. Blown over a kilometer and walked away. Charles Mayhew was simply standing on the Halifax pier, watching what looked like a small fire. He had no idea he was about to join the tiny club of people who have experienced long-distance flight without an aircraft. When 2 ships collided and exploded, the shockwave turned Charles into airborne cargo, launching him more than a kilometer, as if someone were beta testing a brand new catapult. Witnesses said he flew so far they lost sight of him for several seconds, like when you accidentally launch a game character off the map. His trajectory was so clean that if there had been a scoreboard for accidental long-distance flight, Charles would have been the champion. Even more impressive was the landing. Instead of broken bones or unconsciousness, he dropped into a patch of grass and walked away with only a few scratches. No aftermath, no dramatic injuries, nothing you would expect after traveling farther than many early-era drones. He stood up, confused but fully alert, as if life had just hit the respawn button in the safest possible spot. Charles Mayhew became the perfect example of physics occasionally deciding to be unreasonably gentle. 24. The Titanic guy canceled his ticket at the last minute because he just didn't feel like it. While the world saw the Titanic as a masterpiece of engineering, J.P. Morgan looked at it and thought, "I'm not in the mood." He owned the company that owned the ship. A luxury suite was waiting for him. He was supposed to be on its maiden voyage, but as the departure date approached, he suddenly changed his mind and announced he would not be going for one very artistic reason. He simply didn't want to. There was no premonition, no special warning, just a man whose vibe did not align with travel that week. A decision as casual as canceling a coffee date ended up saving his life. On the night the Titanic struck the iceberg and sank, J.P. Morgan was thousands of kilometers away, probably enjoying breakfast without the slightest idea that he had just dodged one of the most famous disasters in history. The funny part is that people love telling stories about strong instincts saving someone from death. Morgan had no instinct, just a mood that said maybe another time. If skipping events counted as a survival skill, he would qualify as an expert. The Titanic is a lesson about technological pride. Morgan is a lesson about how sometimes canceling plans is perfectly timed self-preservation. 25. The guy who tried a homemade parachute. But luckier than Franz Reichelt, not everyone sees Franz Reichelt jump off the Eiffel Tower and thinks, "I can totally do that with some bedsheets." But this man did exactly that. He decided to build his own parachute by tying together a few pieces of fabric and wearing it with the confidence of someone who has never studied physics but deeply believes in the power of the DIY spirit. Instead of testing it somewhere low, he chose the roof of his house as the starting point. Neighbors watched, probably preparing themselves for a very unfortunate moment. He stepped to the edge, spread his arms like a baby bird leaving the nest, and jumped, hoping the bedsheets would handle the rest. The chute did not open under any definition of the word function, but fate stepped in. He fell straight into an unusually large bush. The the kind of shrub that had probably grown tired of being pestered by cats and decided to save a human for a change. He stood up, shaken but intact, instantly becoming one of the rare people whose failed parachute experiment still allowed them to sprint back inside and review their design. He did not become the second Reichelt. He became proof that major mistakes are sometimes redeemed by a single well-placed bush. 26. The idiot gold miner, who lit dynamite to see if it works. In a mine, gold miners usually know the difference between a good idea and a method that sends the whole crew sprinting for their lives. This man did not. When he found an old stick of dynamite, he decided to test whether it still worked with the pure spirit of chaotic experimentation. He lit the fuse. In the split second that followed, he learned what everyone else already knew. Explosives do not stop being explosives just because they look sad and dusty. The fuse caught, and he threw the dynamite away with the speed of someone who had just realized he was standing next to the most vivid workplace safety lesson imaginable. The explosion shook the entire tunnel, making his coworkers think he had struck a new gold vein. When the smoke cleared, he stepped out completely intact, only a little blackened, literally. No one could tell whether he had been saved by quick reflexes or by the universe deciding to be merciful for once. In every safety manual, this action ranks at the absolute bottom. Yet he survived, becoming a real-life example of the kind of luck that would rarely repeat if anyone tried it again. Sometimes you do not need a guardian angel. You just need to be scared at exactly the right moment. 27. Garrett Lisi quit teaching to go surfing and then claimed he decoded the universe. Garrett Lisi is proof that not every genius sits in a laboratory. Some stand on a surfboard. After leaving his teaching job, he moved to Hawaii and spent most of his time chasing clean waves instead of grading physics exams. Somewhere between two surf sessions, he began studying the mathematical structure known as E8, an object so complicated that even professional physicists usually pretend it does not exist. No laboratory, no research grants, just a whiteboard, an old computer, and the attitude of let's see what happens. The result: Lisi announced a theory claiming he had found a model that could describe all the fundamental particles in the universe. Scientists were cautious. The media, however, fell in love instantly. The story was simply too good. A laid-back surfer who spent his days riding waves and his nights analyzing the fabric of reality, casually declaring he had touched the secrets of everything. Within weeks, Lisi became an international sensation. Not because his theory was proven, but because it came from a man whose lifestyle made the entire world curious. Even though his E8 model remains unconfirmed, media luck turned a part-time scientist into a name echoed from beaches to conferences. 28. Sam Patch, the man who jumped off Niagara Falls just to look cool. Sam Patch lived by a simple philosophy. If one jump makes the crowd scream, a higher jump will make them scream louder. He started with bridges, then dams. Once he got comfortable with freefall, Sam decided to upgrade his act to Niagara Falls, a place normal people visit to admire, not to launch themselves off. In front of thousands of spectators, Sam stood on the cliff, arms out like a performer about to step onto a grand stage. No safety harness, no technical calculations. He jumped, and unbelievably, his vertical drop blended into the crashing water as if he had spent his entire life training for that exact moment. No injuries, no shock. Just another reason for him to keep pursuing his part-time career as a waterfall jumper. That success pushed Sam to repeat the stunt at other falls. He became the poster child for people who do dangerous things solely because it looks cool, yet somehow dodge every physical consequence. If history had an award for people gravity decided to treat gently, Sam Patch would be at the top of the list. 29. The drunk soldier who survived a 9-round firing squad. On the battlefield, drunk soldiers usually cause trouble. But for one unlucky man sentenced to death, a drunken firing squad became an accidental life raft. He was tied to a post, standing before 9 men with rifles. The order to prepare was shouted, but instead of tense professionalism, the entire squad swayed like they were closing out a village festival after far too much alcohol. The volley erupted, but the results did not resemble anything found in a military manual. One bullet flew too high, one veered wildly off to the side, another hit a tree behind him. When the smoke cleared, the man who should have been dead was still standing, while the firing squad looked at one another as if they had just discovered a secret gun mode called cannot hit the target. The captain was confused, the soldiers were embarrassed, and the condemned man was somehow the most sober person present. No one wanted to fire a second round. If the first volley was this chaotic, a repeat could hit anything literally. After much hesitation and argument, the execution was cancelled in a way no military textbook has ever covered. He lived through a moment that was both dangerous and absurd. A firing squad too drunk to shoot straight. A perfect blend of absolute risk and pure, ridiculous luck. 30. The farmer who survived a meteor because it hit his outhouse, not him. This farmer did nothing dangerous, nothing reckless, nothing unlucky. He simply went to the bathroom at the right time. One morning, he stepped into the outhouse in his yard, completed his routine, and walked out. 5 seconds later, the sky delivered a large meteor straight into the structure that had just served him. The impact obliterated the entire outhouse. Dirt and debris exploded upward, leaving behind a smoking crater. The farmer turned around, stared at the scene, and needed a few silent seconds to process the fact that if he had adjusted his clothes even half a moment slower, the meteor would have had a very different target. Neighbors rushed over, each offering their own theories, but everyone agreed on one thing. Few people in history have survived thanks to excellent digestive timing. And the farmer understood, quietly but clearly, that sometimes luck does not come from intelligence. It comes from a stable morning routine. A meteor has countless landing spots on Earth. It chose the outhouse, and he chose to walk out at the perfect moment. 2 trajectories missed each other by seconds, and that alone put him on the list of people saved by nothing but perfect timing.